Hi guys, Andy and Spoken Label back in the house on a Wednesday evening. Hope you're all well. Yes, we have a podcast I booked in, I think the other month this was actually. And I've been looking forward to speaking to this young lady ever since, because she's recently bought out a collection with Animal Heart Press, which I have been really enjoying. And we'll come on to that shortly. Now, the young lady's name is Jessica Kim. Now, she's an extraordinary writer. And she's so extraordinary. I've actually gone and bought her press along with the interview today, which is Elisabeth Horan, who people may spot. I spoke to Elisabeth fairly recently about her work. And didn't you, Liz? Liz, you referred Jessica over to me straight away on this one.
I did. I said, I had such a fun time with Andy, and we were just releasing her brilliant book at Animal Heart. And I thought, oh boy, I got to connect these two if I can. So it worked out.
Yes, worked out perfect. Now, we've been chatting to Jessica for a few minutes before we got on air today, and I'm really looking forward to this chat. Now, Jessica, obviously, for people who don't know you, obviously, then you've been telling me already, haven't you, a little bit about where your writing came from originally. So take us back to this journey, first of all, to at the beginning of lockdown when you entered a virtual writing workshop, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I actually started writing in March 2020. So it's been a little more than 2 years since I started writing poetry. One of the first times I found a space where I felt like words really mattered was a workshop that I did with Sandra Beasley. And Sandra also identified as disabled. And that was the first time I felt that I could talk about disability and I could potentially write about disability. So that was, I guess, the roots of where my collection started. And at that time, I obviously didn't know that I was going to be writing a book, but it was a really good starting point for me to be consistent with my writing.
Now, what I found extraordinary was, you were telling me off mic before about this, was you hadn't actually done any writing before this, had you? So it's almost like, was it going into this workshop? It's almost like it released a trigger in your brain, really, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Actually, I was not a writer in my childhood. I was more of like the math kid who loved math, who loved science.
Oh,
So
wow.
writing, yeah. So writing came as a real surprise to me. I think it was just the pandemic being so like emotionally taxed that something had to come out, and that's kind of where writing came out for me, especially poetry, because I feel like it's the most, you can put the most emotion in like relatively short lines. And so I started seeking out workshops and like a community. So it's kind of where I started, and that's where I am now too.
Impressive, because like you said before, like you usually find, and my family's like this, where both my sister and my brother are both really good mathematicians. I'm hopeless with maths. really poor. But I was aware, I was always that kid at school when I was writing from a very early age. Liz, I know you were the same as well, weren't you? So when you told me that originally as well, so that's why I find it's extraordinary in Jessica's case, like you've actually managed to master both of them. Now, Jessica, were you much of a reader when you were growing up then, before prior to entering poetry?
Oh yeah, I think I was a reader. I remember as a child, I really loved books, and I still do. So I read everything from like fantasy to children's fiction to young adult fiction, and then like even memoirs and those kind of things. So I guess reading did influence me in more subtle ways, but when I got into poetry, it was something that kind of fueled me through and gave me a lot of like inspiration.
Yeah, because obviously I don't want to hark on things too much. I'm not like that, but like people would obviously know, like obviously your reading and writing has come from a specific angle for yourself, really, hasn't it? Over your basic life, and people know I'm partially sighted, and you are as well. So it was almost like a release for you, wasn't it? Then really, when this writing came out, then really, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so it was definitely like some form of release in terms of like energy and in terms of like what I could offer. So yeah, it was, I guess, because reading is a way to consume literature, and whereas writing for me was a platform to take charge of that. So yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, I've got there's quite a bit you've done here, and I want to go into some of these topics, and then we'll go into the collection and bring Liz into the conversation as well in a bit more depth. Like, I've just found it remarkable, and this is far from a patronising tone and not, I'm impressed. Like, it was like, tell us then about you've won quite a few awards and second prize, and like the amount of magazines you read for, and editor-in-chief and stuff. And before we go into each individual one, then, did you envisage, say, 2.5 years later, you'd be doing so much of this stuff like now? It's like it's an incredible journey.
It was an incredible journey, and honestly, it's been full of surprises. So no, I didn't really imagine myself right now, like where I am right now in terms of like awards. I just submitted, and when I first submitted, I didn't always like win stuff, so it's been a process for me, honestly. But every time I got to win an award, or every time I got to publish someone's work as my role as editors for a few magazines, I've felt really fulfilled, and that has given me like the agency to continue writing and to continue publishing and editing.
Yeah, I want to touch on a few of these, obviously, to give people the breadth of the awards you've won, and I think you've done brilliant, really, really have it, in such a short period of time. Where, like, tell us then, first of all, then, about your experiences of becoming a Los Angeles Youth Poet Laureate, and also
Yes.
then as well becoming runner-up on the United States National Youth Poet Laureate. That's a mouthful as well.
Yes, so I became the Los Angeles Youth Poet Laureate last June, so like a bit more than a year ago. It was a surprise because I remember being in the finalists reading. There were around 18 finalists, I think, and that time no one knew who was going to be the next LA Youth Poet Laureate. So I was just like in my bedroom reading a piece of mine. I actually read Ghazal for K, which is in my book, and I read, and then it was so unexpected when they announced me as the Youth Poet Laureate. So I think it was so full of surprise that I took a long time to kind of accept that position and accept my role as a poet for the community. But I started from a place where I was writing more for myself, but then the LA Youth Poet Laureate position kind of really allowed me to think about my community and involve my community in my creative work. And when I became one of the National Youth Poet Laureate finalists, I really had the chance to share my story with other people, with like a large audience. And that actually culminated in in-person performance at the Kennedy Center in Washington, DC.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
that was a magical experience.
Oh yeah, stuff like, you don't forget stuff like that. Fantastic. And then obviously after that, you became runner-up, didn't you, for the United States National Youth Poet Laureate? But that must have been more magical for you than after when you got to that stage.
It was.
Oh, incredible stuff. Now, obviously, I really want to get onto your book in a minute, but obviously, like before, you've also, like, people are wondering, the researcher, you were the first prize winner of the Columbia College Chicago's Young Author Contest as well, and also like the second prize winner of the Bennington Young Writers Award in the poetry aspect. Did these all come around about the same time, did they, or was it just after?
So for Columbia College Chicago, I found out that I was the first place winner around early 2021. And then the Bennington came in early 2022. So it was a year apart, but I think both were equally exciting because I could see like the work, I guess a lot of my strongest pieces came in early 2021. So actually I won both awards with similar poems, like poems that I wrote at similar times. So I thought that was really interesting because usually for me, I end up kind of not liking old work, but then that experience, like winning those awards, that kind of validation gave me the confidence that I could love my words like for a long time. And I hope that continues.
Long may it roll, definitely so. Now, I want to know, obviously, we've hinted at before, obviously, about, I know you read for a lot of magazines at the moment as well. Now, I'm not going to go into details which ones they are, because I've read your bio, and that sort of thing does change, because I know Amanda, my wife, does that as well, and it changes all the time. So, but tell us about then what made you want to get into, first of all, reading for magazines?
Oh yeah, so I really wanted to publish other writers and start a magazine. So when around the time I first started writing, I founded a magazine called the Lumiere Review. And I guess I was really scared because I didn't have any experience publishing, and also I was pretty new in the writing world, so I didn't know anyone. So I just like kind of started this alone, and then I think it was really like an uncertain process where I didn't know really what I was doing. But then I like set up a website and I set up a few like social media accounts, and then people actually started submitting, and that was like a moment for me because
Wow.
I think my editorial work is just as valuable as my own writing. So it kind of spiraled. Yeah, it kind of like spiraled from there. I just really love organizing things. I love sharing people's stories, and I also love reading other people's stories. So that's kind of how Lumiere started, and we've come a long way. We hosted like writing contests, and yeah, we published over like 300 pieces. So it's been really cool. And simultaneously, I joined a few other literary magazines like Polyphony Lit, and also my school's literary magazine, which is The Ink and the Iris. So that's kind of where I am with editing, and I've had like a bunch of experiences from different publications, and it's been amazing.
I bet it has indeed with that. Do you actually find, and obviously when you're doing so much reading, and I'm going to ask Liz this as well, I'm going to bring Liz in for this one. I want to ask Liz the same question, so I don't have to repeat myself. I always find, because Amanda, my wife, she used to run a magazine, and it found when she got into that, it took all her time up because you're getting so many submissions. Like it was like you find out it takes over your life sometimes, doesn't it? So have you found that yourself, Jessica, first of all?
Yeah, I felt there were moments like that for me, but I think at the end of the day, reading submissions has been kind of like what I do in my free time, and I actually really enjoy it because it's reading, and I really love reading.
Me too as well. I'd always love when you're reading. I used to help Amanda out with submissions, and I loved the fact was you used to read all these pieces with people you may have never come across before, and it's fantastic. Liz, generally, have you found that yourself with Animal Heart Press, have you?
Oh yeah, I mean, you get in deep and you're running a press, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I haven't written anything in ages. you're full on in. But I do think, to read other people's work, to do it for your own mag. I mean, it gives you kind of a foothold in the community, and you get to keep your finger on the pulse of what people are doing and what is new and what's exciting. And it makes you connect with other editors. So it's like, it's getting yourself in that fabric of the world, not just the writing piece yourself, but you become part of like that whole community of helping other poets come up. which, you know, without that, where would we all get our start, you know? So
Oh,
I
completely.
do think it's hugely important, and but it is hard to find time. You have to carve out the time and say, okay, now I'm inspired by that piece I read, so I'm gonna go try to write now a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to just, you know, juggle it all, right? Somehow.
Completely.
It helps
Now,
when you're young. It helps to be 18. You can juggle things.
I
Yeah,
know
that's true.
oh yeah, I remember I was 18. I was terribly uncreative at that point. I used to mess around with so much stuff at the time, and now I'm like the age I'm at, and it was like that. I somehow managed to have 7 projects on the go. Sleep is optional. That's all I'm gonna say.
Go, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I live by too.
Now, obviously, before we go into your collection, Jessica, I just want to quickly ask you as well. You were telling me a little bit off mic before as well about Right Girl Mentee as well. So tell us a bit about that then, first of all, because that was a project I've not heard of before, and I think it sounded interesting what you told me before.
Yeah, so Right Girl is a wonderful organization, and they are based in LA, and I joined maybe around like April of 2020. So I only lived through Right Girl in the virtual world, but I heard from all the directors and volunteers there that they used to host in-person workshops, and that was more like local to Los Angeles. But during the pandemic, they've offered virtual workshops, and it started more as a local thing, but it really expanded to just accommodate anyone who was willing to spend a few Saturdays writing and connecting. And they've brought wonderful people. The famed Amanda Gorman, who read the poem at Biden's inauguration, was a Right Girl mentee.
Oh,
and yeah, and
wow.
Organizations like Right Girl have really brought young poets like to the forefront of everything, and I'm really glad to be part of Right Girl and just learn from amazing people. Like I've seen like actresses from Gilmore Girls. I've seen a lot of like famous script writers, famous journalists, and it's been a really great platform to connect with other writers and just really cool people.
Oh, fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. Now, obviously, we'd better have to get onto your collection next now. So now I'm absolutely hopeless here. There's another thing I've got a condition I suffer from, dyspraxia. So I'm going to have to ask you to, first of all, tell me how you pronounce the title of your collection, Jessica, so I do apologize for this.
Oh, yeah. So I guess when I was like maybe 6 months into writing, I kind of envisioned myself having something physical to like house all my work. And I also wanted to kind of narrow down my writing to a specific theme, because I was just writing like all over the place. And originally I thought my collection was kind of all over the place, but then I think I've grounded very like important and personal topics to me in my collections.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
So I think, oh yeah.
Sorry, no, go on, ladies first. Sorry, go on. Apologies.
Oh, no worries. I think it like my collection kind of arose like out of the blue and kind of like with uncertainty, but it was something that I guess like consumed a lot of my writing approaches and my writing time in late 2020. And I'm really glad that I found Animal Heart Press to publish my work.
Yeah, understandable. Now, Liz, obviously, we better bring you back into this then now. Then, obviously, I want to know about your experience. I mean, you got this manuscript come through from Jessica, and it obviously, I don't know what sort of editing and rewriting's gone into this, but it blew me away when you sent the manuscript over to me. Tell us about how it impacted you when you first read this, because it's an extraordinary pamphlet. This is
right. So this was the winner of our chapbook contest for 2021. Amanda and Beth were kind of managing the entries and, sorting into yes, no, maybes. And when they showed this one to me, they tried to not be like, we love this one, they just wanted to get it in front of me. And we were all so floored by it for many reasons. At Animal Heart, we're always kind of looking for the next thing, a combination between intelligence, craft, and then vision. Like, we want a big deal. We want something that hasn't been done before, because things get done over and over again. So, but seeing this was like, and I didn't even know who was the writer when I read it. So I imagined kind of an older woman. I didn't know, but we all felt so strongly about it, and it was never in question that we wanted to work with Jessica if she would have us. You know what I mean? So yeah, and I don't think we did a whole lot of editing. I know Beth worked with you, Jessica, on some on the manuscript and stuff, but it came to us really quite perfect. Am I right, Jessica? You didn't do a whole lot, just a little tweaking here and there, I think. But it's so complete as a whole, too. When you talk about kind of, what goes into putting together a manuscript that works, it has to be kind of this tight narrative, this story that you bring the reader in with you and you follow through to the end. And yes, while Jessica kind of touches on a lot of different things, it is highly hyper focused, and it kind of plows this path through, and you're just right with her the whole way to the very last poem. So that's brilliant, and that's not easy to do. It's not easy to do as an 18-year-old or as a 40-year-old. It takes major curation of your work to turn it into that united book, not just a series of poems you have. So we were pretty excited and pretty gung-ho, and knew it was something special right away.
Yeah, I can see why straight away with it. Now, I don't want to go into tons of detail on the book, Jessica, I'll be honest with you, because one of those books where I could probably spend about 2 hours going through with a pair of you on some of the points from the poems you raise. But certainly, I've got to ask you, talk on one specific poem in the book, okay? Which is a finale poem, actually, because it was, and this has inspired me in my writing since as well, because it's made me think about things in a different way. So I want to ask you about this poem at the conclusion, poem in which my disability talks about me. Now, I love that idea, Bear. It's like you've turned everything on its head with that poem. And it's the title of it is a unbelievable piece, and the greatest poem's a really cracking poem. So tell us about that poem then. First of all, then, was it a poem that was wrote first, or did you do the title first? I got the impression that I could have gone either way.
Yeah, so that specific poem of mine is really like affirmational, and really, I guess, it kind of like celebrates my collection, and also like my experience as a visually impaired writer. And for me, that was kind of a foreign idea, because a lot of my poems cover more like lows in my life, rather than like moments of celebration or moments of joy. So when I wrote that poem, I knew that my collection had to have like a glimmer of hope. And I think that poem, amongst some others, have really like grounded that idea. So I'm personally like really proud of that piece as a writer who has like done something new, in a sense, for me. So that's kind of where the poem arose. And it wasn't the first or last poem I wrote, actually. The first poem I wrote was a poem called a poem in which my disability, in which I talk about my disability, and I think that's in the middle of my collection. So I kind of wanted to make that series sort of like a central theme in my work. And so that last poem actually came after that first poem that I just mentioned. So it was kind of like I've been like maybe grieving through all these poems, but I wanted a place where I could kind of treasure my work and celebrate my work. So that's where that last poem came from.
Yeah, I think it was a clever move to finish off with that piece, because certainly, like the rest of the book, obviously, like he's said already, is touching a lot of your life. I got that from the book itself. This one, I think, is where it's like an acceptance piece on the full piece at the end of it. And I think that's exceptionally good writing to finish off with there, because it finish. I won't say they finish off with a positive note, but it gives a sort of note, you open your arms to whatever life leads you to next. And I think that's fantastic writing. Really, no two ways about it. Now, to start wrapping up now, Jessica, what I always like asking is the wrap up, obviously, and I did this to Liz at the bottom as well, so Liz knows what I'm going to say to you now, was I always like to ask writers, what plans do you have next? Do you have any sort of ideas where you want to take your creativity next?
Yeah, so I personally have been a little slow with writing. I think I haven't written a poem in quite some time, but that doesn't mean that I don't like see myself writing again. I definitely am gonna write like over the summer, obviously. And so for next, like I'm pretty open to next steps. For me, personally, I think a lot of everything I've been doing, like as the Youth Poet Laureate, as the author of a book, it kind of like ended a few months ago. So I felt like I had a lot of like open space to firstly give myself some time to rest, and also think of like new ideas. I'm thinking of potentially going into maybe prose, like creative nonfiction, or even like a hybrid between poetry and creative nonfiction. So I'm planning to explore more genres and kind of expand what I can do. I think that really like goes hard. It fits hard with Animal Heart Press's kind of vision on seeing like the next big thing or like the next new thing. So I'm
Brilliant.
really like subscribing to that idea, and I hope to continue to challenge myself.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And I'm sure Liz would agree, with start wrapping up on this now, I always believe as a writer and artist, never stand still. You've always got to be trying out other things, whether you publish them or not. Sometimes it's the journey of completing that project, see how it goes. So
that's right. And I think one thing I love so much about Jessica's work is, every poem in this collection is a different form.
Oh,
so
yeah.
She absolutely knows how to use her form to support the text and the context, which some people just have no idea. They have the same kind of structure for each of their poems. Jessica will put in a sonnet. She'll put in a sonnet with dashes. She'll go totally experimental. She will use slant right. She uses everything. She already knows how to do prose poems, So I think, a next thing for you, Jessica, is like full on prose text box collection follow up to this, where it's like you said, it's like flash fiction poetry. It's like, going deep and weird in those text box. Like I love prose that, because you can just get so nuts with it.
Do it.
And then when you do that, send it to us.
When you do it, when you get it done, let me know, because I want you on here again. I want to ask you deep questions about that next.
About form, being brave about form and trying new things, and she's got a high bun in there. Will only expand your writing. If you get stuck in just, I just don't use form, I just do experimental. Well, no, you need to know the craft, so then you can play with it and break the rules and make up your own form. Next thing we'll know, maybe Jessica will have like the Jessica sonnet that is like, just slightly her own thing. Like that's the kind of stuff you got to work towards,
No,
for real. I really appreciate form, and I think it goes like beyond poetry. I always think like poetry as the epitome of form, but then it always can go beyond that. And I really love experimenting and also exploring form. So yeah, that's something on my
And
radar
you know
too.
what's interesting that I've found a pattern with many poets I've known is when they do have math and science brains, they can get a sonnet figured because you have to follow these rules and structures and patterns that if math and science is really hard for you, those are really hard for some poets to pick up. But so I can see in your brain that math science background like helps you just
Yeah.
boom, 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 you know?
Yeah, I can see the
Which is
similarity.
awesome.
The similarity to your work, Jessica, and somebody I interviewed a couple of years ago, I'm not going to name, who was a math scientist, and he bought out a poetry collection. And the work in your book is dead right in what both of you have said. You've got that sort of the way you think about your work shows in this where everything's like 2 + 2. Your opinion may think 2 + 2 equals 4. But what if I then throw this into it? Will it make it 5? And there's a fearlessness in your collection.
It's very
That's why
technical. You know, it's incredibly creative, but there's this technical thing about it that everything is doing its job. You know, if you look at it closely, it's like a well-oiled machine that has been figured and yeah, it's exciting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. I know what would I do? I want to get a chance to get Jessica some pieces of that so we'll wrap this part up now very quickly, or instead of just the three of us just I would say shooting the breeze and getting nothing done. So now, Jessica, obviously, if people want to find out more about you, where are the best going?
Yeah, so I have a website, jessicakimwrites.weebly.com, and I'm also around on social media. I use Jessica Kim Writes on Instagram, and on Twitter I am JESSIICABLE.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Now, obviously, Liz, I'll ask you then, can the collection be got at all good and evil news sellers, booksellers, etc., and online, can it be?
Yeah, her book is on our Animal Heart Press website. It's everywhere. I mean, you can go on Amazon, and you can go on Goodreads. You'd find it. But if you're not sure where to go to animalheartpress.net under new releases or wherever it's on our bookstore. It's there. We appreciate the support when you buy directly from the publisher. Yeah, it's brilliant and it's beautiful. The cover of it is so gorgeous. The whole thing is just a work of art. So, you know, if you don't have one in your hands, I highly encourage it. You won't regret buying it.
No, definitely won't with this one, Mike. And you get me saying that. I don't say that often. Dead right, the pair of you.
Absolutely.
Right, ladies, we better wrap up part 1 here. So I want to get Jessica as much time as we can to give you a few pieces for us. So this has been a fantastic podcast, part 1. I've loved this. Thank you to the pair of you. And we shall see everybody in 2 minutes.